Amma Mensa parked her car on the quiet street of Accra, her heart fluttering with excitement and a little nervousness. Christmas Eve had always been special in her family, and even though she was a single mother now, she wanted Nia to feel the warmth of family traditions. Holding her daughter's hand tightly, she walked up to her brother Kwame's house, humming a soft Christmas tune. As soon as the door opened, Kwame greeted her with a polite smile, but there was something stiff, almost forced, in his tone. "Amma, you're here," he said, his eyes flicking briefly past her. His wife, Efua, stood beside him, folding her arms, her smile thin and tense. Amma felt a tiny pang of unease. It wasn't anything she could name, but the warmth she had imagined seemed to fade instantly. Nia, clutching her little backpack, looked up at her uncle and aunt with wide, trusting eyes. Amma knelt down and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. Let's enjoy tonight." She tried to shake off the strange feeling in the pit of her stomach, telling herself it was just holiday stress. But as Kwame and Efua exchanged a glance that lasted a little too long, Amma sensed it. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. There was a subtle edge in the way they looked at her and Nia, a coldness wrapped in politeness. Amma swallowed hard and forced a smile, greeting the few other relatives already gathered. Inside, a quiet warning rang in her mind. Tonight might not be the warm, joyful Christmas she had hoped for. Amma's heart sank as she stood frozen in the doorway. Kwame's face was tight, his polite smile gone. "Amma, Nia can't stay," he said, his voice sharp and cold. Amma blinked, not sure she had heard him right. Efua stepped forward, her arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "Yes, we can't have her here this year," she added, her words clipped, almost rehearsed. Amma felt the air around her tighten, like someone had slammed a door in her chest. Nia, sensing the sudden tension, clutched her mother's skirt, her small face scrunching in confusion. "Mama, why can't we stay?" Nia asked, her voice trembling. Amma dropped to her knees, hugging her daughter tightly, brushing back her soft curls. "I don't know, sweetheart. I don't know," she whispered, though inside, anger and disbelief were bubbling fiercely. Amma tried to speak calmly, to reason with her brother. "Kwame, it's Christmas Eve. We've come all this way. Nia just wants to spend time with her uncle and aunt. Please." Her words hung in the air, met with cold stares. Kwame's expression hardened. "Amma, you're always so irresponsible. You cause problems everywhere. This isn't surprising." His voice was like ice, cutting through the warmth Amma had carried in. Efua nodded, as if to underline every word, her mouth set in a firm line. Amma felt a wave of humiliation wash over her, but she squared her shoulders, refusing to let it show in front of Nia. The room felt smaller, crowded with tension and silent judgment. Amma realized this was more than a simple Christmas disagreement. This was a deliberate attempt to isolate her and hurt her child. Nia's small hand clutched hers tighter, and Amma felt a fierce protective surge. She looked at her daughter's worried eyes and knew she couldn't let this break them. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the muffled sounds of distant laughter from neighbors celebrating. Amma took a deep breath, forcing calm, though her mind raced. She understood now. Tonight wasn't just about family dinner. It was a test, and she would not let them win. Nia's small shoulders shook as she began to cry, her sobs breaking the heavy silence in the room. "Mama, why are they being so mean to me? Why am I not welcome?" she asked, her voice trembling, eyes wide with hurt and confusion. Amma's heart clenched at the sight of her daughter's tears. She pulled Nia into her arms, hugging her tightly, feeling the warmth and fragility of her little girl against her chest. "It's not your fault, Nia," Amma whispered, stroking her hair gently. "You're loved always. I promise. No one will ever make you feel small or humiliated while I'm with you." She could feel Nia's tears soaking into her sweater, each drop fueling a fire of determination inside her. Amma held her daughter close and closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself remember all the times she had been overlooked, dismissed, and even betrayed by people she had trusted. The memories stung, the sneers, the unfair blame, the cold shoulders, but they also reminded her how strong she had become. She would not allow the past to repeat itself for Nia, not in this moment, not ever. Looking into her daughter's tear-streaked face, Amma felt a resolve settle deep in her chest. This wasn't just about a Christmas dinner. This was about standing up, showing dignity, and protecting her child from cruelty. Nia deserved laughter, warmth, and the joy of family, not fear and rejection. Amma whispered again, softly but firmly, "We are strong, Nia. Stronger than anyone who tries to hurt us. We will get through this together." As Nia's sobs began to subside, she buried her face into Amma's shoulder, finding comfort in the strength radiating from her mother. Amma held her tighter, feeling a wave of clarity. Tonight, she realized, would mark a turning point. She wouldn't let anger or humiliation dictate their lives. Instead, she would face it calmly, strategically, and with power. Amma's mind raced with ideas, small sparks of plans forming. She would protect her daughter's innocence, her dignity, and their bond. Nothing would take that away. In that quiet embrace, Amma made an unspoken vow. No matter how hard her brother and his wife tried to push them away, no matter how cruel their words, Amma and Nia would remain unbroken. Love, courage, and determination would guide them tonight, and every day after. Nia sniffled and looked up at her mother, a hesitant smile breaking through her tears. Amma returned the smile, her own eyes shining with strength. "We're okay, Nia. We are more than okay. We're unstoppable." Amma sat on the edge of her bed that night, Nia asleep in the next room, and let her mind wander back to the old family albums and her father's leather-bound journal tucked away in the attic. She remembered the faded photographs of her mother smiling proudly beside Kwame, the little notes in the journal that hinted at favoritism, and the subtle ways her siblings had been treated differently over the years. Every memory, every photo, every scribbled note suddenly felt like pieces of a puzzle she could use to protect Nia and herself. The next morning, Amma quietly began her work. She opened drawers, sorted through old letters, and scrolled through messages on her phone. There were videos from past family gatherings where she had quietly contributed to events and finances, messages where Kwame and Efua had tried to dismiss her efforts, and documents showing her name on property deeds that they had conveniently ignored. Each piece of evidence made her pulse quicken with both fear and hope. It wasn't just about proving a point. It was about reclaiming respect and protecting her daughter from being sidelined or humiliated again. Amma reached out to her friend Kojo, a sharp and practical lawyer she had known since university. Over coffee, she explained the situation, careful to stay calm. Kojo listened, nodding, his brow furrowed in thought. "Amma," he said finally, "you have more than enough to protect yourself and Nia, but you need to act carefully. This isn't just about proving a point, it's about strategy. Let them reveal themselves without giving them a chance to twist the story." His words settled over her like a blanket of clarity. Amma realized she didn't need to react with anger or rush into confrontation. She could plan, gather her allies, and present the truth in a way that couldn't be denied. Kojo offered to help organize the documents and videos, giving her practical steps and advice while reassuring her that she wasn't alone. Over the next few days, Amma worked quietly but purposefully. She labeled files, compiled photos, and backed up videos. She even began writing small notes for herself, reminders of what each piece proved. Every photo of a holiday she had funded, every message where she had helped Kwame financially, became a tool to safeguard her dignity and her child's happiness. As she worked, Amma felt a strange mix of empowerment and anticipation. The fear she had felt the night Nia was rejected hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed. Now it fueled her determination. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, fairness, and showing her daughter that no one, not even family, could ever diminish their worth. By the time the sun set over Accra, Amma leaned back in her chair, exhausted but resolute. She looked at the neatly organized files, the journal notes, and the photos, and a quiet smile spread across her face. Tonight, she thought, they would see that she was not someone to be underestimated. And for Nia, Amma promised herself, this fight would always be fought with love, courage, and intelligence. Amma sat at the kitchen table late into the night, a notebook open in front of her, her pen moving steadily as she wrote down every thought. She had felt anger, hurt, and humiliation over Kwame and Efua's behavior, but she knew one thing clearly: reacting impulsively would only give them more power. Instead, she needed a plan, careful, calm, and unstoppable. She thought about the evidence she had gathered, photos, old messages, property documents, and videos, and realized she had everything she needed to show the truth. But it wasn't enough to just confront them privately. She wanted the world, or at least the people who mattered, to see it. Amma smiled slightly. This wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness, dignity, and showing her daughter that standing up for yourself could be done with intelligence and grace. Her first step was subtle but crucial. Amma began inviting a few trusted family friends and neighbors who had seen the contributions she had made over the years. These were people who remembered her quietly funding Christmas parties, helping with family repairs, and supporting Kwame financially when he struggled. They didn't know the full story, but they knew enough to confirm that Kwame and Efua's version of events was far from the truth. Each invitation was worded casually, nothing that would alert her brother, but enough to make sure key witnesses would be present when the time came. Next, Amma thought through the sequence of events for the dinner. She would arrive with Nia, appearing calm and composed, as if nothing had happened. She would let Kwame and Efua show their true colors on their own first: hostile, uncomfortable, and clearly avoiding accountability. Then, at the right moment, she would reveal her evidence, carefully, calmly, so it couldn't be dismissed or twisted. As she wrote, Amma imagined every possible reaction: Kwame's anger, Efua's defensiveness, whispers among the guests. Each scenario made her refine her approach, adjusting timing, words, and gestures. She even practiced short sentences in her mind, simple but powerful, that would carry authority without sounding vengeful. Amma knew that patience and strategy were her strongest weapon. By the time she closed her notebook, she felt a calm determination wash over her. No longer overwhelmed by hurt or fear, she was ready. Tonight, she thought, she wouldn't just protect Nia. She would show the family and community the truth about her contributions, her strength, and the hypocrisy of those who had tried to undermine her. Amma took a deep breath and smiled softly. Nia was asleep upstairs, safe and innocent, and that was all the motivation she needed. This Christmas would be different. This Christmas, they would witness dignity, courage, and the quiet power of a woman who refused to be humiliated. Amma held Nia's hand firmly as they approached Kwame's house once again. The sun had begun to set over Accra, casting a warm glow over the street, but inside Amma felt a chill of anticipation. This time, she carried herself differently, shoulders back, chin high, and a calm confidence that radiated with every step. Nia, sensing her mother's strength, walked beside her a little taller, clutching her small backpack but no longer trembling. As they opened the door, a hush seemed to fall over the room. Guests who had arrived earlier exchanged curious glances, sensing the tension in the air. Kwame, who had tried to act casual, suddenly looked uneasy. His smile faltered, and Amma noticed a faint flush creeping across his face. Efua's arms remained crossed, her jaw tight, and the subtle hostility that had greeted them earlier was now more obvious under the watchful eyes of the other guests. Amma smiled politely, a soft and controlled smile that carried warmth without weakness. She greeted the friends and neighbors she had quietly invited, nodding gracefully and exchanging brief, friendly words. Her gestures were small but deliberate, touching Nia's shoulder affectionately, speaking with calm clarity, and maintaining eye contact that was firm but kind. Every movement reflected dignity and confidence, contrasting sharply with Kwame's growing discomfort. Nia clung to Amma for a moment, then relaxed, encouraged by her mother's calm presence. She peeked at the other children, noticing a few familiar faces, and allowed herself a small, shy smile. Amma whispered, "Stay close, sweetheart. We're okay now," and Nia nodded, feeling the protective shield her mother provided. As Amma moved through the room, she noticed subtle shifts in the atmosphere. Guests who had once avoided her now offered polite greetings, and some exchanged quick, surprised glances as they observed Kwame's flushed face and Efua's tense posture. The balance of power in the room had shifted without a word being spoken. Amma's calm, measured presence sent a clear message. She was not here to beg, to argue, or to be humiliated. She was here to reclaim her space with grace. Every glance, every gesture, every soft word to Nia reinforced that. Even the smallest interactions, handing a plate to a neighbor, laughing quietly at a child's joke, were acts of quiet strength that highlighted her dignity. By the time everyone had settled around the table, the tension was thick but palpable in a new way. Kwame and Efua could no longer hide their irritation, and Amma knew she had already begun to win. Tonight, she thought, was no longer about fear or rejection. It was about presence, poise, and the quiet power of showing strength without raising your voice. As dessert was being served, Amma felt the moment was right. She smiled at Nia, who sat quietly beside her, and took a deep breath. The room was warm, filled with the sweet smell of Christmas treats, the clink of cutlery, and soft chatter, but Amma's mind was focused. She reached into her bag and pulled out the first piece of evidence, an old photograph of herself carefully arranging Christmas decorations, while Kwame and Efua looked on, laughing as if they had done all the work. "Do you remember this Christmas, everyone?" Amma began, her voice calm but clear. "I made sure our home looked beautiful that year. I handled the decorations, the gifts, and even some of the food expenses." She placed the photo on the table so everyone could see it. A few guests leaned forward, eyebrows raised, murmuring softly to each other. Next, Amma brought out messages on her phone and printed copies of texts where she had lent money to Kwame during a difficult time, as well as receipts showing her contributions to family property repairs. "These messages show that when my brother needed help, I stepped in," she said. "And yet, tonight, we see the same people trying to push my daughter and me away." She placed the texts and receipts carefully in front of the nearest guests, letting them see the evidence for themselves. Some neighbors whispered among themselves, their voices low but filled with surprise. "I never knew she did all this," one whispered, shaking her head. Another murmured, "Kwame and Efua always acted like they were the ones giving." Amma let the whispers grow, letting the truth ripple through the room. Finally, she pulled out property deeds showing her name and contributions over the years. "This isn't just about Christmas," Amma said softly but firmly. "This is about fairness, respect, and honesty. The people who tried to erase my efforts cannot deny the truth in these documents." She looked directly at Kwame and Efua. "These are not accusations, they are facts." Kwame's face went red, and he opened his mouth to speak, but Amma had anticipated them. "No, Kwame," she said gently, raising a hand to pause him. The evidence is clear. You can't rewrite history tonight. Efua looked stunned, unable to find words, her tight smile gone. The guests continued to murmur, some nodding in agreement, some glancing at Kwame with disbelief. For the first time that evening, the tension shifted. The power dynamic had changed. Amma's calm presentation, her collected evidence, and her quiet dignity made the truth undeniable. Nia looked up at her mother with wide, proud eyes. Amma squeezed her hand under the table, feeling a rush of satisfaction. Tonight, she had not only protected her daughter, she had exposed the hypocrisy of those who had tried to diminish them. The room was buzzing, and Amma knew she had done exactly what she had set out to do. Kwame sat frozen, his face bright red, staring at the photos, messages, and deeds Amma had laid out so calmly. Efua's jaw was tight, her hands gripping the table, as if trying to hold herself together. The room was silent except for the soft rustle of papers and the occasional whisper from guests who could hardly believe what they were seeing. For the first time that evening, Kwame and Efua had no words, no excuses, no way to twist the truth. Amma's voice remained steady, controlled, yet powerful. "This is not about humiliation," she said, glancing around at the neighbors and family friends she had quietly invited. "This is about honesty, respect, and fairness. And it's about protecting my daughter from being treated like she doesn't belong in her own family." She paused, letting her words sink in. Nia, sitting beside her, looked up with wide eyes and a small smile. For the first time that night, she felt safe. A few of the older relatives whispered apologies to Amma under their breath, shaking their heads at what had been allowed to happen. "We're sorry, Amma, we didn't know how bad it was," one aunt murmured. The whispers spread quietly, rippling through the room, softening some of the tension. Yet others sat back, shocked, still processing the courage and calm with which Amma had confronted her brother and sister-in-law. Kwame opened his mouth again, but Amma didn't flinch. Her eyes met his, calm but unwavering. He tried to speak, but the weight of the evidence and the quiet authority of her presence held him silent. Efua's lips pressed into a thin line. She could no longer maintain her usual pretense of politeness. Every guest in the room saw it, the shame, the disbelief, the sudden reversal of power. Amma leaned slightly toward Nia, brushing her daughter's hair from her face. "You see, sweetheart," she whispered softly, "we never have to accept being treated unfairly. We always have the strength to stand up for ourselves." Nia's small hand squeezed hers, and Amma felt a swell of pride and relief. By now, the room had changed completely. Where there had been tension and discomfort, there was a new respect for Amma. People looked at her differently, admiring her courage, her dignity, and the way she had handled the situation without anger or shouting. Kwame and Efua remained frozen, unable to reclaim control, while Amma's calm and strategic response left everyone else in awe. In that moment, Amma realized she had done more than defend herself and Nia. She had reminded everyone present of the power of truth, patience, and quiet strength. And as she glanced at Nia's smiling face, she knew this Christmas would be remembered, not for conflict, but for courage, dignity, and justice. After the room finally settled from the tension of the reveal, Amma took a deep breath and looked around at everyone gathered. Her heart was still pounding, but her mind was clear. She realized that tonight wasn't just about proving a point. It was about showing what family, loyalty, and justice truly meant. She thought about all the times she had stayed silent, all the times she had been pushed aside, and she felt a quiet pride in herself for finally standing up, not just for herself, but for Nia. Amma stood a little straighter, her voice calm but carrying weight as she began to speak. "Family is more than shared names and shared meals," she said softly, letting her words reach everyone. "It's about loyalty, respect, and supporting one another, not tearing each other down. It's about standing up for what is right, especially when it comes to protecting the ones we love." She looked down at Nia, who smiled shyly, then back at the adults in the room. "Tonight isn't about shame. It's about recognizing the truth, honoring fairness, and remembering that dignity should never be taken for granted." Guests murmured in agreement, nodding quietly. Some older relatives leaned forward, their eyes thoughtful, perhaps realizing how often they had overlooked her contribution. A few whispered apologies to themselves or to her directly, their expressions softening. Amma's calm but firm tone had reached them, reminding them of the power of truth spoken with courage and composure. Kwame's face was a mixture of anger, embarrassment, and realization. For the first time, he saw clearly that his arrogance had backfired. All his attempts to belittle Amma and isolate her had only highlighted her strength and integrity. Efua, meanwhile, was speechless, unable to argue, unable to deflect. The very calmness that Amma had maintained throughout the evening had become her strongest weapon, leaving them exposed without a single raised voice. Amma continued gently, "I hope we can all take a moment to reflect on how we treat each other, not just tonight, but every day. Let respect, fairness, and love guide our actions, because these are the things that truly build a family and a life worth celebrating. Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made everyone pause. Nia squeezed her mother's hand, and Amma smiled down at her, feeling the warmth of pride and protection. She knew she had taught her daughter more than any words could. She had shown her how to stand tall, to act with courage, and to defend what is right. The room was quiet, but it was a quiet filled with admiration, reflection, and a sense of change. Amma's lesson had landed. Dignity, respect, and fairness weren't just ideals, they were actions. And in that moment, Amma realized that she had not only protected her child and herself, but she had reminded everyone present of the true meaning of family and power. Amma held Nia's hand tightly as they stepped out of Kwame's house, the cool night air of Accra brushing against their faces. For the first time that evening, Amma felt a lightness in her chest. The tension, the fear, and the humiliation were gone. They had faced the challenge together, and won. Nia skipped slightly beside her, a bright, carefree smile replacing the worried frown she had worn just hours earlier. They made their way to a close friend's home, where the warm glow of lights and laughter greeted them. Amma set down her bag, and Nia immediately ran to the other children, laughing freely, her small voice ringing with joy. Amma watched her daughter play, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief and pride. She had protected Nia, shown her strength, and ensured she felt safe, loved, and valued. As the evening went on, friends and neighbors spoke to Amma quietly, expressing admiration for how she had handled the situation. Her calm, strategic approach, her dignity, and the courage to expose injustice had left a strong impression. Word would spread quickly through the community about the mother who had stood up for her child, who had turned humiliation into triumph, and who had done it all with grace. Amma looked at Nia, her eyes shining in the warm light, and smiled. She realized that tonight was about more than family drama or Christmas dinner. It was about empowerment, justice, and the quiet strength they carried within themselves. Holding her daughter close, Amma whispered softly, "Some Christmas gifts aren't under the tree. They're the strength we find in ourselves." And as Nia laughed, twirling around in the living room, Amma knew that this Christmas would be remembered forever. Not for the conflict, but for courage, love, and the unshakable bond between mother and daughter.